The term political elite refers to a relatively small group of people who hold significant political power within a country. Often, these individuals occupy high-ranking positions in government, such as elected officials, senior government executives, influential party leaders, or major policymakers. Beyond formal government roles, the political elite may also include influential figures in other sectors, such as the media, academia, or business, who play a crucial role in shaping public policy and political discourse. Here's an in-depth look at the concept of political elites. Characteristics of political elites: influence and power. Political elites wield significant power and influence over the nation's political landscape. They are able to shape policy, influence public opinion, and determine the direction of both domestic and international agendas. Access to resources. Members of the political elite often have access to substantial resources, including financial capital, information, and networks. This access enables them to maintain their status and influence within the political system. Education and background. Political elites typically come from privileged, educational and socioeconomic backgrounds. Many attend prestigious universities and are often connected through professional and personal networks that enhance their ability to wield power. Functions of political elites. Policy making. One of the primary functions of political elites is the formulation and implementation of policy. They are responsible for making decisions that can have wide-reaching effects on the state and its citizens. Representation. Although they represent a small fraction of the populace, political elites often claim to represent the broader national interests. How effectively they fulfill this representative function can vary significantly, and is often a subject of political debate and public scrutiny. Leadership. Political elites provide leadership and vision for the country. Their decisions can lead to significant changes in economic policies, social programs, and international relations. Criticism of political elites. Disconnect from general public. Critics argue that political elites can become disconnected from the everyday lives and concerns of ordinary citizens. This disconnect can lead to policies that favor the elites and contribute to social and economic inequality. Corruption and cronyism. Political elites are sometimes criticized for engaging in corrupt practices and cronyism. The concentration of power among a small, interconnected group can lead to abuses of power and a lack of accountability. Resistance to change. Due to their vested interests in maintaining the status quo, from which they benefit, political elites may resist necessary reforms. This can hinder political, economic, and social progress. Dynamics within political elites. Internal competition. Political elites are not a monolithic group. They compete among themselves for power, influence, and resources. This competition can manifest as factionalism within political parties, competition between branches of government, or rivalries among different bureaucratic institutions. Role in democratic societies. In democratic societies, the power of political elites is checked by constitutional limits, the rule of law, and regular elections. However, the effectiveness of these checks can vary, and the role of elites remains a controversial aspect of democratic governance. Adaptation and change. Political elites must continually adapt to changing political, social, and economic conditions. This includes responding to shifts in public opinion, technological advances, and global dynamics. Conclusion. The concept of the political elite is central to understanding the workings of political systems, especially in terms of how power and influence are distributed and exercised. While political elites play an essential role in the governance of a country, the degree to which they remain connected to the broader populace and responsive to their needs is crucial for maintaining legitimacy and trust in the political system. The challenge for societies is to ensure that the political elite governs with transparency, accountability, and an eye toward the common good, rather than solely advancing narrow interests. 2. The theory of elites. The theory of elites is a significant concept in political sociology and political science that examines how a small group of individuals, or elites, holds a disproportionate amount of power and influence in society. This theory challenges the classical democratic idea that power is distributed among the populace, and suggests instead that power is concentrated in the hands of a few. Here is an overview of the main concepts and theories related to the idea of political elites. 1. Origins and key theorists. The theory of elites originated in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Key figures in developing this theory include Vilfredo Pareto (1848 to 1923), an Italian sociologist and economist who introduced the idea of the circulation of elites. According to Pareto, society is always ruled by a minority that possesses the qualities necessary for its accession to social and political power. He believed that once elites become decadent, they are replaced by a new elite group. Gaetano Mosca (1858 to 1941), an Italian political scientist known for his theory of the ruling class, which posits that a structured minority of individuals will always rule over the disorganized majority. Mosca emphasized the organizational skills of elites as the source of their power. Robert Michels (1876 to 1936), a German-Italian sociologist, best known for his work on political parties and the iron law of oligarchy. Michels argued that all organizations, regardless of how democratic they are in their ideals, inevitably evolve into oligarchies ruled by a few. He suggested that the technical and administrative demands of organizations necessitate leadership by a select group. 2. Basic assumptions. The elite theory rests on a few fundamental assumptions. Inequality of power distribution. Power is both structurally and inherently unequally distributed in society. Minority domination. A minority of the population makes the most crucial decisions in any society. Inevitability of elite rule. Elites are inevitable in any organized society due to the inefficiency of mass decision-making and the need for specialized knowledge in governance. 3. Criticisms and debates. T. He theory of elites has been subject to various criticisms. Deterministic critics argue that elite theory is overly deterministic, underestimating the capacity of democratic institutions and civil society to place checks on elite power. Neglect of social mobility. Some suggest that the theory does not adequately account for the potential for social mobility, where individuals from non-elite backgrounds can rise to positions of power. Insufficient attention to popular resistance. It is also criticized for paying insufficient attention to how popular movements can impact and even reshape elite configurations. 4. Contemporary relevance. In contemporary discussions, elite theory has been used to analyze a variety of modern political outcomes and phenomena, such as the establishment and influence of political dynasties, the power of corporate lobbyists, and the roles of technocrats within government. The theory is also relevant in studies of how economic inequalities influence political outcomes. 5. Extensions and adaptations. The theory has evolved to address its earlier critiques by incorporating concepts of elite fragmentation, competition among elite groups, and the impact of new social forces and technologies on elite dominance. This has led to more nuanced discussions about the interaction between elites and non-elites, the role of media in shaping public perception, and the influence of global economic structures on national politics. Overall, the theory of elites provides a framework for understanding the dynamics of power and governance in both democratic and non-democratic systems, highlighting the challenges of achieving true democratic governance in the face of concentrated power. IV. Presidential leadership. Presidential leadership is a multifaceted and critical area of study within political science, focusing on how presidents lead and manage both the executive branch and the broader governmental and societal realms. It involves the analysis of how individual presidents interpret and enact their roles, the strategies they employ to exert influence, and the impact of their leadership style on a country's governance and policy outcomes. Here are key components and dynamics of presidential leadership. 1. Styles of leadership. Presidential leadership styles can vary dramatically from one leader to another. influenced by their personality, political philosophy, and the historical context in which they govern. Commonly identified styles include transformational leadership. This style is characterized by the ability to inspire and motivate followers to change expectations, perceptions, and motivations to work towards common goals. Transactional leadership. This approach is based on an exchange process, where the leader provides resources or rewards in exchange for the support or labor of followers. Charismatic leadership. Charismatic presidents inspire allegiance, devotion, and enthusiasm primarily through their personal charm and appeal. Pragmatic leadership. This style focuses on practical approaches and solutions rather than ideological purity or visionary changes. 2. Decision-making process. The effectiveness of presidential leadership often hinges on decision-making capabilities.
Shade pulled back to reveal an unseasonably warm Monday morning in Washington, D.C. First up is a walk across the hall to the dining room, where breakfast is served by a team led by longtime executive chef Christeta Comerford. Also provided are reading materials, a packet known as the Bulletin, which staffers curate to include the news that, these days, Joe Biden wants to read, both as the president and as the person. In addition to the biggest national and international stories, it's known to disproportionately include those from his home state of Delaware. But minutes later, the president walks upstairs to the White House's rarely pictured third floor. Nestled on its northeast corner is a small workout room where he starts his days by working out with trainer Drew Contreras, one of the many returnees from the Obama administration. Quick shower, quick change, and it's 9 a.m. Time for the commute downstairs and across the West Colonnade to the fabled Oval Office. $755,580,000 is dedicated to running the presidency in 2023. Even excluding attributable costs borne by other areas of government, and despite sitting at its lowest in years, this figure translates to $2,070,079 a day, $86,254 an hour, or $3,593 per minute, meaning spread out evenly, before the president even arrives for work, the American taxpayer has paid $750,000 for the job that day. An eye-popping sum, but one that could be worth it depending on what happens with the rest of the day. The most crucial role of the president is as the go-to when big decisions need to happen quickly. Therefore, they have to be informed on just about anything that could boil over and reach their desk. That's why almost every day starts with the most important regular meeting, the daily briefing. On this Monday, the 13th of February, 2023, that starts exactly at 9 a.m., and considering she might need to stand in for Biden at moment's notice, Vice President Kamala Harris was also included, having made the far longer commute down from her residence at the Naval Observatory. The central document of these meetings is prepared by the major American intelligence agencies, summarizing what they think the president should know, and so it's been described as the, quote, most highly sensitized classified document in the government. Clearly, then, there is zero chance the public can legally view any from any time recently, but the CIA did declassify some, the most recent of which from January 20th, 1977, the final day of the Ford administration. It starts with a summary of protests against rising food prices in Egypt and the dramatic effect it was having on President Anwar Sadat's popularity. This intelligence proved accurate. He was assassinated 4 years later. Next is coverage of stalling peace talks on Cyprus, a still classified section about West Germany and France, news about an upcoming trip by Soviet leader Podgorny to India, stalled price negotiations within OPEC, a trip cut short by Yugoslavia's president, and finally a status update on tensions in Benin. The report's short, the point's brief, but that's the point. The president's supposed to be the generalist, not the specialist. Next, Biden meets with his brand new chief of staff, Jeff Zients. This role is tough to define because it's so all-encompassing, but at the simplest level, the chief of staff is essentially the manager of the White House. They deal with coordinating all the operations of the president and their office, even extending to developing policy, and therefore it tends to be one of the most powerful positions in perhaps the most powerful nation on earth, and yet its holder is rarely well known outside Washington. But quickly, a minor crisis. Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy tweets that he's lost confidence in architect of the Capitol, Brett Blanton. This is an even less known position leading the agency that runs the Capitol complex, therefore responsible for some 2,500 employees and an $800 million annual budget. But Blanton was facing mounting pressure as a recent Inspector General report highlighted a series of missteps. He had accrued 19,000 miles or 30,000 kilometers of prohibited personal use on his government-issued vehicle, even driving it to Florida on vacation, costing the taxpayer an estimated $12,500 in additional wear and tear. He also outfitted the vehicle with lights and sirens, misrepresenting himself as a law enforcement officer, invited friends in for so-called patriot tours while the Capitol was closed to visitors early in the pandemic, and allegedly did not even show up to work on January 6, 2021, as the building he oversaw was invaded by a mob of election-denying rioters. McCarthy was the most powerful voice asking for Blanton's removal yet, and having done so in such a public manner, it was time for Biden to act. Now, we don't know the exact details of how this particular decision was made because the minute by minute details of a president's day, at least within the White House, are not a matter of public record. We get what's called the public schedule, but that only includes what the White House wants us to know about, usually events open to the public or press. Mondays include few of those. They tend to be fairly boring. Nobody really schedules events on the first day of the work week, so no matter the administration, archives of public schedules indicate that, unless traveling, Mondays overwhelmingly focus on the kind of internal policy and planning work that we, the public, don't get to know the details of. At least not for a while. You see, the White House Office of Appointments and Scheduling does keep track, and like most non classified government documents, eventually the public can get access through the rights granted by the Freedom of Information Act. Still, there's a FOIA exemption restricting access to presidential records for 5 years. Then there are months or years of processing time on top of this. So the most recent minute by minute understanding we have of a president's day dates back to the Bush administration. On a similar boring Monday in February, Bush, a notoriously early riser, arrived at the Oval Office by 6:58 and immediately jumped into a series of meetings with his inner circle before his 8 a.m. daily briefing. After was another quick huddle before loading onto Marine One for a quick flight over the river to Mount Vernon for a ceremony commemorating the 275th birthday of George Washington, and then the president was back in the Oval Office just 75 minutes after stepping out. The rest of the day was a continued cascade of calls and conversations, the most exciting of which a 90-minute conference with the Prime Minister of Australia, potentially in relation to the day's announcement that the country would send additional troops to Iraq. Finally, the Monday wrapped with a small event. A screening of the movie Amazing Grace to commemorate Black History Month before the president finished with dinner in the diplomatic reception room at 6:37 p.m. February 13th, 2023 likely looked rather similar for Biden. Just a succession of short, unscheduled meetings with key administration officials, largely in preparation for the rest of the week, with the exception of making a decision on what to do with the architect of the Capitol. That clearly happens quickly because by 3 p.m., it's announced. Biden fires Blanton. Finally, the last task the public knows about is a 4:30 call to Colonel Paris D. Davis, informing him that, after decades of waiting, he would be awarded the Medal of Honor for heroism in the Vietnam War. As usual, the president returned to his residence by 7 p.m., finishing the day with dinner and a read of a collection of 10 letters his staff selected out of the countless more sent to him by the general public. An unexceptional finish to an unexceptional Monday. The rest of the week, however, would lead up to perhaps the most exceptional day of his presidency. Tuesday, slightly busier. It begins with a daily briefing and a call to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to celebrate the day's announcement that flag carrier Air India would purchase over 200 American-made Boeing aircraft. Elsewhere in the West Wing, press slowly amble in. The White House originally told them to arrive at 7 a.m., but in the early hours